In this video, I'm going to show you 6 examples for how to factor out what is called the greatest common factor, also known as GCF for short. And in a previous video, I went through how to find the GCF. So if you're not sure how to find it, go back and watch that video before you watch my factoring video. So now that we know how to find the GCF, I want to show you how to factor that GCF out. So I'm going to actually just real quick review my 3 steps at the top. Step number 1, find the GCF of the terms. And number 2, divide that GCF from all of the terms that you have in the polynomial. And number 3, put the simplified polynomial in parentheses that's left over, and the GCF goes in the front. So I'm going to show you 6 examples of what that looks like here. My first example is 6x squared plus 5x cubed. Now I'm going to write this out here as 6 times 1 times x times x. And then my 5 times 1 times x times x times x. Actually, I can break down my 6 into a 2 and a 3. So I'm going to do that instead. Notice how the number terms do not have anything in common. So technically, if I multiply by 1, I get the same number. And so my GCF between 6 and 5 is, well, they really don't have any factors in common. But you can always take out, if there's nothing in common, the number 1. Now with my terms, the amount of letters that they both have 2 x's. So what I'm going to do is pull out what's called an x squared. Now what we're going to do with this GCF is divide this out of each of our 2 terms, and we're going to write what remains in a set of parentheses. 6 divided by 1 is 6. X squared divided by x squared, there are no x's left over because I took all of them out for the GCF. And then 5 divided by 1 is the number 5. And if I have x cubed and I take out 2 x's, notice how there was 1 x left over. And so this is what is called the factor that remains. And so this is what our answer looks like. It looks like x squared, because I don't need really that 1 in the front, and then 6 plus 5x. Now this is how you check to make sure you have the right GCF. What you do is you look at your set of parentheses and make sure that there is nothing in common with those terms that are left in the parentheses. If there's not, then that means you pulled out the complete GCF. Another way to check, just to make sure that you did this correctly, is if you were to distribute your x squared, you should get what you started with originally. So x squared times 6 is 6x squared, that's correct. And x squared times 5x is 5x cubed, and so I know that this would be a correct GCF. Here's another problem. The number 15 can be broken up into a factor of 3 times 5, and the y cubed is y times y times y. The number 20 can also be found from a multiple of 5. It's 4 times 5 and just 1y. And so the number that they have in common is the number 5. That's part of our GCF. And I notice that they both have some letters. They both have at least 1y. That's what they both have in common. This makes up what is called your GCF. And let's write down what remains from our terms that are left over. So notice how there's a 3 left over, and there are 2 y's left over. So that's a y squared. There's a subtract sign connecting my terms. I pulled out the 5, I pulled out the y, there is a 4 left over, and that is our factored GCF and the polynomial that remains. So what you can do is look in your set of parentheses. 3 and 4 have nothing in common. There's no y's that they both have. And so again, I'll just double check. 5 times 3 makes 15 for the first term. Y times y squared is y cubed, that's correct. 5 times negative 4 is negative 20, and we multiply in 1y, we do get negative 20y, so this would be our correct factored form. Okay, let's keep going. The greatest common factor between 9 and 3 is 3. And 3 times 1, and then we have x squared, so 2 x's and a y. So what they both have in common is a 3, so that's going to be part of my GCF. And then they both have 2 x's, that is also going to be part of my GCF. So that goes out in the front, and then we write what's left over. A 3 got left over here, and a 1 and a y got left over here. Now, when you write your y term here, you don't really need the coefficient of 1, so I'm going to rewrite that as just 3 plus y. And that is your GCF taken out of your answer. I should have boxed my answer over here. If it's more helpful for you, for me to highlight, I'll do that real quick with these 3. So again, the highest number that both terms are divisible by comes out front, the largest number, and then if you compare your terms, it's the smaller amount of the letters that they both share. So notice how here the smaller x squared here came out, and here the smaller just 1y came out, and then here x squared, they both had that came out. Actually, I didn't even write x squared, did I? I should have written that. And then both terms did not have a y, so I couldn't take out a y because they both didn't have that. All right, let's keep going. I have 3 more examples for this video. So 3x squared would be 3 times 1 times x, and my 6 would be 3 times 2 times x. I notice the number they both have in common is a 3, so that's going to be part of my GCF, and they both have one letter x that I can take out. Now I'm going to write the terms that are left behind in the set of parentheses. I don't need to write a coefficient of 1 in front of the x, and then I have a number 2 here. And that is how you factor out a GCF. For 10 and 3, the factors of 10 would be 2 times 5, and our x cubed is x times x times x. 3 is 3 times 1 times 1x. Notice how there are no numbers in common. If there are no numbers in common, then perhaps you can't take a number out. But I do notice that they both have hold on. Need to grab another pencil here. They both have at least one letter x. So I'm going to pull that x out because they both share the x in common. And now what's left inside the parentheses is what is left over. The 2 and the 5 make a 10. The x and the x make x squared for the first term. The 3 and the 1 make a 3. And there's nothing left in common between 10 and 3. They have no factors in common. And then pulling out 1x, notice how I don't have any more x's to take out of both terms, so that is my greatest common factor. All right, one last one here. The largest common factor that 35 and 42 have is the number 7. And x cubed would be 3 x's. Now 42 is 7 times 6, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 x's that they have in common. So the number that they both share is the 7. That's in common. And the amount of letters that both of them have is 3 x's. So 7x cubed is called the GCF. And what we write in parentheses is what remains. The negative 5 remains for the first term, a 6 remains for the next term, and 3 x's, so 6x cubed. And that is how you factor out a GCF. Stay tuned for another video with some harder examples with more terms and more letters.